I'd like to turn to the issue that I wanted to bring up today. And I was asked to speak about student retention and persistence here in higher education in Poland. I know that it may have somewhat to do with some recent legislation and budget issues that may affect how much universities get paid from the government. But I was asked to talk from a U.S. perspective. And I think that there are things that perhaps we can find direct relationships to the Polish situation from from the lessons learned in the United States. So first of all, it's important to understand that there is a context for what I think many developed societies are experiencing regarding student retention. There's a shrinking pool of students that are prepared for university studies. As it gets tougher and tougher to actually find the great students that one needs in the university settings and in your colleges, it is also very important in the United States for them to continue to find students who can actually benefit from the academic rigor that takes place at the university level. It's also, we know that it's not easy to fill in seats that are open in schools through international recruiting. It gets harder and harder every year. In the US, for many years, we did exceptionally well because we were bringing in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of students from Asia to supplement the students, the domestic students in the United States. Well, for reasons that really don't need further explanation, tensions have been created between countries, and China, other Asian countries do not send as many students to the US any longer. And those types of pressures are another reason why student retention, meaning keeping the students that you actually bring in to the school, gets more important every year. There are more students at risk. I don't know if you feel it in Poland, but it certainly exists in the United States, that first-generation students. And are you familiar with that term? A first-generation student is no one in their family has ever gone to university. And in the United States, more students today as a percentage of the student body coming into college, their families have no experience with a university education. They are first-generation students. And they experience a whole set of other types of issues around study habits, cultural issues in terms of how important it is not only to get into college, but stay there, do well, and graduate from college and universities. It's an important thing, and I don't know if it's designated in Poland, but first-generation students, although they want to do the work, oftentimes don't have that cultural background that really helps them to be supported during that very crucial first year of admission into a university. In the United States, and from what I understand in my readings of students around the world, that emotional and behavioral concerns have gone up. About 25% of the student bodies in the United States need some level of psychological intervention. They need some counseling, they need support, they need ongoing mentoring in the university in order to be successful. And when you think about those types of things, you go, wow, most universities were not ready for that. A lot of it is the result of the pandemic. A lot of it is believed to be the result of some of the issues from spending so much time on social media. And some of it, and I'm sure in Poland you have it, some of it is from the anxieties around conflict. And in the US, every political campaign is a conflict. I can imagine what it's like here in Poland, where in fact you have conflict right at your back door. It's also important for universities to be intentional in their process for enrolling students who are a good fit. US universities enroll students, they admit students, if they feel that student is going to be successful in that university. There's one university in the United States that for a number of years, it was almost impossible to distinguish between one student and another because they all got 100% of their entrance testing. SAT scores were 100% correct. Caltech, all right, California Technical University, every single student who got into their classes, enrolled into their schools, had 800 scores in SATs. So how did they make their decisions as to who was going to get in? And so it was a matter of, in fact, because you're not selecting some students. There are many other students who applied that had 800s. They made a whole set of decisions as to who was going to benefit and who was going to make a contribution to the university. And then finally, today's students are highly mobile. This level of mobility extends to how they feel about every engagement and transaction that they have. To them, a university might only be considered another type of transaction. And if they don't like it, they'll move to another one. So holding on to students today, I think anywhere in the West, is a very, very challenging thing for all universities to be dealing with. Students who drop out, especially those during the first year, rarely return. So if you lose a student in the first year, it's unlikely that they're ever going to come back. In the US, it's complicated by a whole series of other factors, such as if they drop out and they have debt, they have to get back to work so that they can pay the debt of the tuition. And I know that that isn't quite the financial dynamic here in Poland, but there's something else that's going on in addition to the debt issue, the personal debt issue that American students who drop out take on. Once they get back out, they'll prefer to work than to, in fact, come back into the university. And that puts a lot of strain on universities who, in fact, lose students that first year. The loss of high-risk students is economically disruptive to individuals and schools. It's a waste of tuition. It puts people in debt in the United States. And students who are high risk, and by virtue of being first generation, they already have an elevated risk. But if they have some other condition in addition to that, it's something that, in fact, really complicates the issue for students in the US. Inefficiencies produce systemic risks and higher costs for others. So every empty seat that takes place in the United States in a university or a college, that's a seat that's not paying tuition and thereby increases the costs for every other person who is attending the university. And it negatively impacts the finances of the schools. They lose lost tuition. In the US, they have dormitories. It's an expectation that if you're going to a US university, you're going to stay in a dormitory on campus for the first couple years. You have to pay to actually be in the dormitory. There are fees associated with that. Universities lose lots of money if they lose lots of students, and they have empty dormitories. The cost of recruiting to replace lost students is extremely high. It costs more. It's believed by research that it costs more to replace a student than to keep a student. And it's something that all of us should be aware of, that that dynamic probably applies to every university, no matter where that occurs in the world. And then, of course, in the US, any dropouts, and the higher the dropouts, directly impact rankings in the United States. So schools that have high dropout rates, they have significant rankings issues. I would doubt that there is any school that has a dropout rate in the first year in excess of 10 or 12% that is ranked in the top 100 schools. I don't think that that's possible given the rankings issues. And it probably is an indication that there are other problems in the school too, which I'm going to try to tie all of these things up in terms of a set of strategies that schools use. And you'll see the level of complexity that takes place in order to try to increase retention. So when I'm referring to retention, and it's understood in the US that there are different measures for retention. And these are all key performance indicators for universities in the United States. As you can see here, first year is the most critical because universities are at most risk of losing students during the first year. Those students come in, they make a decision, this is either for them or it isn't, or the university either cares for them or they don't. Students need, and we had a discussion last night about this, students need to feel that they belong in the university that they're at. And if there is not outreach that is being made by the university, displayed through a dozen different ways, which we'll get into in a moment, they'll say they don't belong. They don't feel that they're wanted. They don't feel needed. They don't feel community with the university, and they leave. So first year is the first metric. After that, students usually try to march through. If they come back for year 2 in the United States, they try to march through, though that level of persistence is difficult in years 2 and 3, and a university that is not doing a good job in year 1 in retaining their students has a very, very challenging period retaining a lot of the students in the following years. For urban students in the United States, those who are admitted to a university, do any of you have any idea what percent actually come out the back end on graduation day? Any ideas? Now, these are students from public urban high schools in America. And of those who go to the university, get accepted, go into school that first day, how many of them come out the back end and graduate? What do you think? Someone said 70%? All right, it's roughly 50%, and in many cases it's from 35 to 50%. What a waste of talent. What a waste of talent for students who had displayed through their high school years that they wanted to go to university, that they wanted to learn, they wanted to succeed, but they didn't get there. And then the ones who graduate, the cumulative one for most universities is, what's your graduation rate? All right. In the US, if you don't graduate, 90% of those people who walked in the door in year one, if you didn't keep them, if you didn't graduate them, it is impossible for you to be ranked as a selective, high-quality school. It is very, very challenging. And it is an amazing process because there are just so many complicating factors that go into it. Highly selective admissions start at the very basis that who you bring into your school has to be an intentional admission, meaning the test scores are great, and you probably have to use them, but they're not the only determinant. There are other factors that you need to consider. You need to focus on first-year success and student involvement. If you can't get students to buy in that first year, you're going to lose them, or they will be disengaged. In the US, we try to keep students engaged for a long time because we want them to be contributing members of the alumni community back into the university. And I stayed engaged in my university. I went back there and became a trustee, became the chairman of the board of trustees at Clark University, was on that board for 12 years. Those are the types of people, the alumni, that you want to have, who will come back and volunteer and basically just tell the great story about the educational experience that they had. The most important thing that drives students for staying in a university is that they have to believe in the longer-term career benefits of staying in that university. And they have to believe that that every university is going to help them find the job that will change their lives and their families' lives. And that means that they need to see on campus that you're bringing successful people back in. They need to know that you are bringing in business leaders to meet your students so that they may want to hire them. There are other things that highly rated and ranked U.S. schools do. They have tremendous amount of support services. And do you know what's unbelievable? Is that the successful schools also have high endowments. And, you know, the Harvards have billions of dollars of endowments, but there are about 40 schools in the United States that have over $1 billion endowment, which is basically their internal foundation. And who funds that endowment? Satisfied students who have graduated and been successful. And they're the ones who are giving back to the university. So my final page on today's presentation is, we talked about a lot of pieces in my discussion here, but it isn't one piece that fixes anything. It's a systemic approach to really transforming a university to understand what makes their university successful from the eyes of their students. They're real customers, they're students. And so when you look at it here, and that's a roadmap on the bottom of the things that you, excuse me, that the things that you need to take on. But it is a complex issue because it's an institutional-wide effort. It has to be well-designed. It has to be intentional. Your plan for improvement has to be monitored, managed, and you have to hold people accountable for achieving results. And it's rooted in making the classroom experience better than what it currently is. So when you take a look at the very bottom here of this roadmap, these are the types of things that need to be addressed. These are the strategic components, and you need a business plan for each one of these in terms of how do you improve student retention, student engagement, which results in persistence. And persistence is in the eyes of the student, they feel like they want to stay there. They want to be at the university because they know when they come out, they're going to derive lifelong benefits and rewards from that experience. Your experience, the experience that you are offering them. But they have to know what that experience is going to be. So it starts off with, right at the very beginning, especially during the first year, academic advising is absolutely essential. There has to be a planned process put in place that advises the students as to how they achieve and what courses they should be taking to move and to matriculate through the school. They have to build a social connectedness with your institution. And in the US, you can imagine some of the tools that we have. We have dormitories. We get you in a dormitory, you meet other students, you have the experience of a lifetime of learning from each other, talking with each other, dealing with all of the important issues. You're there 24/7, every single day, with sharing the same experience with every student in the dormitory. It builds connectedness. If you don't have that type of structural element, you're going to have to make up for it somewhere else. We also have sports in our collegiate and university areas. Big team building. Kids get together, they scream together, they yell, they cheer, all right? They talk about their teams, they get an identity with the school. If you don't have that, you're going to have to make up for it somewhere else. Student involvement. The greatest single factor for a student's success is that they have to be involved. They have to be involved in something. They have to have a great relationship with a professor, or they have to be on a club. They have to be a volunteer. They have to do something. So if you're not, in fact, spending that amount of time with your students, finding those types of student involvement, passion-related types of experiences, they will not be involved. Faculty and staff have to be approachable. It's a key element. Every single piece of research that's out there says that if faculty isn't involved in actually helping students, talking with students one-on-one, being available, the student retention experience will not be good. There needs to be new business procedures in the back office providing information on whether or not the students are getting this type of experience. You have to focus and enforce all sorts of learning experiences for the school. Each year, there should be some developmental encounter or process that a student is actually receiving that, in fact, they build on as they continue through the university experience. And then finally, no one likes to hear this part because this is a pretty expensive item, is you have to provide supports. You have to have counseling supports that are available. You have to have mentoring supports that are available. You have to be there to help each and every student on an individualized basis navigate a very, very tricky world in which they enter when they leave home and come to the university. So with that, my thoughts is that this is what is taking place in the United States. When these elements are fulfilled, research has proved that you can increase retention rates anywhere from 5 to 10%. In fact, that's a significant amount when you think of, you do that every year to your student body. That's a lot of students that you're keeping within the university who would otherwise have voted with their feet. So I thank you. I hope that this was useful. I hope that it was somewhat provocative in terms of what's taking place. But one of the things that I have learned through my time working in higher education, and also, I've got to say, in private high school education, because in the US, we have many private high schools. These are all the types of things that need to be managed and managed well in order to keep students at your universities. And when you keep students at your universities, I know that every university will be successful. Thank you.